The bequest and a will is only one, but there are many others. Okay, and what I'm going to do today, what I'd like to do today is several different things. It's kind of a potpourri of planned giving. Okay, this is not going to be a particularly well-organized presentation, but I encourage you to ask questions or make comments or observations, or if you have experiences of your own, please offer those up, and let's have this be conversational as much as anything else. But I do have several things in mind that I'd like to do. So a little bit of background. When I was driving down here today, I was listening to NPR and WFYI out of Indianapolis. Now, I don't know if all the National Public Radio stations do their fund drives at the same time or not. They don't? Okay. Are you with NPR here? No? All right. WFYI in Indianapolis is now down to 2 weeks a year. 1 week in the fall and 1 week in the spring for their on-air fund drive. And it's really kind of fun to listen to this, with my background as a fundraiser and with teaching fundraising, how people talk about this when they try to raise money on air. And any of you know the name Norm Tabler? He's an attorney in Indianapolis, and he's hilarious. And so he's on their board also. But he's on the drive this morning, on their fund drive, and I was listening to him and one of his colleagues raising money for WFYI. And they were talking about a story that was from the state of Minnesota. And they talked about this young man who gave a speech in his high school speech class. And it reminded me of the various kinds of speeches that people give. And he was saying, well, we do an informative speech, we do a persuasive speech, and he named a couple of more. And I thought, well, that's kind of an interesting way to organize this morning. I said, I can do a number of things. I can do straight informative. I can do a little bit of persuasion. But I want to add another little piece too. And I'm going to try to add, from my perspective, what I think is kind of a humorous perspective relative to planned giving. So I have some cartoons I'm going to show you about planned giving. I collect cartoons related to fundraising. Now, this will surprise some of you, but I read the Chronicle of Philanthropy and the Chronicle of Higher Education. I read the New Yorker every week, and the New Yorker, if you've ever read the New Yorker, it has some fabulous cartoons. And so I collect these cartoons about fundraising and philanthropy and nonprofit management. I have more than 300. I'm not going to show all of them this morning, so you'll be relieved to know that. But I did bring some that are relative to planned giving. So I'm going to either start with them, or I'm going to sprinkle them throughout, or I might just save them until the end. But I do want to show you some of these relative to how some people's regard of planned giving is. And then I am going to give you some information from our perspective. And as Jim mentioned, the material I'm going to use comes from the Fundraising School. And we're a program at the Lilly Family School of Philanthropy. And we teach fundraising, and one of our modules is, in fact, planned giving. In fact, we even have a course, a 3-day course in planned giving, which really gets into the nitty-gritty of promotion of a program, what a program looks like, the types of planned gift instruments that an organization ought to think about, the role of the board in planned giving, the role of staff in planned giving, all kinds of things relative to planned giving. We're not going to go into all that kind of depth. But I'm just going to kind of give you an overview from several perspectives. And one of those is give you an overview, which is why I started with the question about Gene Temple's ethical will and philanthropic autobiography, is I'm going to give you a little bit of a perspective about why people ought to be thinking about planned giving as a donor. And then we'll also look at some issues relative to the board. And I'm going to reserve talking about the instruments themselves. I may sort of hint at them, but I know the experts who are going to be with you later today who work in planned giving, they will go more into the instruments themselves and how they work. I'm only on the fringes when it comes to planned giving. I know only enough to know if I hear a signal or a statement from a potential donor that this is somebody that needs to talk to an expert relative to planned giving. I would not be able to negotiate a planned gift myself on behalf of an organization. So that's kind of what I think we're going to do this morning. Again, I do want to encourage you to ask questions or make your own observations or any experiences that you might have. So what I think I will do is start with just some real general background. And, why planned giving? Why should someone think about planned giving, either from an organizational perspective or from a donor's perspective? What's it all about? And when we talk about planned giving, what we're talking about is a determination of a gift that's going to go to a nonprofit organization at some future time. Okay, you make the determination now, because once you've died, there's not much you can do about it. Okay, if you haven't made a decision before that time, it's over. So a planned gift is you make a decision now that the gift is going to be made, the elements are put into place, but the benefit to the organization usually occurs at a later time. Usually occurs at a later time, and that is usually at the death of the donor and or of beneficiaries. But some gifts, in fact, do have immediate benefit. Some planned gifts have immediate benefit to a nonprofit organization. So that's what we're talking about when we talk about a planned gift. We use a definition that has another clause in it, which I really favor. And that clause is, a planned gift is a gift which usually requires professional advice. And that professional advice, I believe, needs to come from the donor's advisors first, not from the nonprofit organization or from a community foundation, because we don't want to be perceived as exerting undue influence. And I'm sure you've heard about or read about lawsuits which have come about because someone challenges a gift that was made through a planned gift instrument. And this is often a challenge that comes from a family, usually the kids. And they didn't know mom and dad cared about the Boy Scouts. And so that here, mom dies or dad dies, and he or she is the last parent surviving in the family, and upon that death, a big gift goes to the Boy Scouts or to the Girl Scouts or the Boys Club or to the local literacy organization. And the kids are challenging this because, well, I never heard mom and dad talk about this. I didn't know they cared about literacy programs. And it kind of brings us back to we don't talk about money, right? Okay. But usually requires professional advice. And that advice really ought to start with the donor's advisors. And then the organization can provide the expertise necessary for the gift to be structured appropriately so it goes to the right place. Okay, Jim and I used to work for Indiana University Foundation, and we're very strict about gifts going to Indiana University Foundation for the benefit of the College of Arts and Sciences or the Varsity Club at IU Bloomington or to the English department at Indianapolis campus, because if you didn't specify that, Lord knows where that money might have ended up. And in fact, one of the horror stories for us historically was that, where is Indiana University? Well, you all know where it is, right? But there's an Indiana University in Pennsylvania. So if we don't get the name right, we're not going to get the gift. Okay, so enough about professional advice. So let me start with some things that you might listen for or think about yourself as a donor. So you're a potential donor, and you want to make a gift to a nonprofit organization or a series of nonprofit organizations, but you don't know exactly whether your financial situation is exactly where you want it to be right now to be able to give an outright gift. So instead of an outright gift, we might think about a planned gift. So listen to some of these concerns that donors might express or that you might yourself express as a potential donor. If you're working for a nonprofit organization, you're talking with a current donor or a prospective donor, and you hear things like these following statements, then you might have a planned gift prospective donor. So here's an example. I'm worried about, or are you, let me ask you the question, are you worried about your future, and in particular, are you worried about your long-term health? Okay? So someone who is worried about long-term health and long-term future, what's the major concern there? Financial security. Okay, so I'm going to be reluctant to give money right now outright because I'm concerned about that long-term financial security. People are living longer, right? So instead of a life expectancy dying at 75, 80 years old, maybe we're looking to go to live to 85 or 90. People are living to be more than 100 years old, more now than before. So we've got that concern about financial security. Well, what's a good option for them? a planned gift in the form of a bequest and a will.